I was sitting at my desk trying to finish a quarterly report when the notification popped up on my phone. A review. 5 stars. Cozy place, host was so welcoming, will definitely book again. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before I understood what I was reading. The listing was for my condo, my address, my living room in the photo, my kitchen, my furniture with a price tag of $180 a night, and my brother's name listed as the host. I put the phone face down on the desk. I picked it up again. I read it again. The reviewer had left a note about the charming brick fireplace and the great location near downtown. I'd installed that fireplace myself 2 summers ago. I'd spent 3 weekends sourcing the reclaimed brick. My hands started to go cold even though the office was warm. I opened the Airbnb app and searched the address. The listing had 47 reviews. The oldest one was dated 11 months ago. 11 months. I pushed back from my desk, walked to the window, and looked out at the parking lot below without seeing any of it. My brother had been renting out my condo for 11 months, and I had found out because a stranger left a review on a Tuesday afternoon. His name was Derek, and he was 34 years old, and he had never once in his adult life paid for anything he could convince someone else to pay for instead. I want to be fair. I want to tell this story without letting old anger color it. So I'll say this plainly. I didn't go looking for reasons to cut my brother off. I spent most of my 20s doing the opposite. I covered his phone bill twice when he said he was between jobs. I co-signed a lease for him in 2019, which I still regret because he left, owing 2 months in back rent, and I spent 6 months untangling my name from the damage. When he asked to borrow my car for a long weekend, I said yes and didn't say anything when he returned it 3 weeks later with a cracked side mirror and no explanation. My mother called it generosity. My therapist called it a pattern. I just called it family and tried not to think too hard about the difference. The condo was mine. I had bought it at 28 with money I had saved for 4 years, living in a studio apartment that barely fit a full-size bed. I had fixed the plumbing myself the first winter. I had sanded the floors. I knew every creak in that building, which step on the staircase groaned at night, how long the shower took to run hot. I was not renting it out. I was between tenants. The previous one had moved out in January, and I was taking my time finding the right fit. I told my family this in passing at a dinner in February. I said I was leaving it empty for a few months while I figured things out. What I did not say, because it shouldn't have needed to be said, was please do not move in, sublet, or monetize my property while I'm not watching. I left work early. I drove to the condo with my hands steady on the wheel, which surprised me because there was something happening in my chest that felt like a power line pulled loose from its moorings. I parked in front of the building and sat there for a moment. The front windows had curtains I didn't recognize, cream-colored with a thin navy stripe. I had left white shears. Someone had replaced them. I had given Derek a key 2 years ago when I had a minor surgery and needed someone to water my plants for a week. I had asked for it back. He had said sure, of course, absolutely, and then he had never returned it, and I had never pushed because it seemed small at the time. I was thinking about that key now. I was thinking about how small things have a way of becoming the exact mechanism through which someone takes everything else. I let myself in with my own key. The lobby smelled like a candle I hadn't bought. Vanilla and cedar. Nice enough. Which somehow made it worse. The condo was on the 3rd floor. I climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator because I needed the extra 30 seconds to decide what I was going to do when I got there. I didn't have a plan. What I had was the kind of quiet that settles over you when the shock has burned through and what's left is something colder and more precise. I unlocked the door. The inside of my home looked like a short-term rental. Of course it did, because that's what it had been for nearly a year. There was a wicker basket on the entryway table with a handwritten card. Welcome to the Lincoln Hideaway Wi-Fi password on the fridge. Checkout is 11 a.m. Help yourself to the coffee. New throw pillows on my couch, 3 of them coordinated. A plug-in diffuser on the kitchen counter. A framed print above the fireplace that I had never seen before, a watercolor of the Chicago skyline, and it was tilted just slightly to the left, the way something looks when a stranger has straightened it without knowing the wall. I walked through every room slowly. The bedroom had a new comforter set, white with gray trim, the kind that photographs well. My original bedding was folded on the closet shelf. He had put it away, like a prop, like my belongings were props in a set he was building on top of my life. In the second bedroom, the one I used as an office, the desk was pushed against the wall and replaced with a twin bed and a luggage rack. My files, the ones I had left in the drawer because this was my home and I had assumed my things would be where I left them, were stacked in a cardboard box in the corner. I sat down on the edge of the twin bed and looked at that box. My tax returns from 2021, a folder of receipts from the fireplace renovation, a lease agreement with my previous tenant, stacked in a box in my own office to make room for a luggage rack so strangers could have somewhere to hang their coats. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Derek. I opened the smart lock app. This is the part I hadn't thought about in months. When I had the door lock replaced the previous spring, I upgraded to a smart system that logged every entry date time, which key or code was used to open the door. I had set it up, connected it to my phone, and then mostly forgotten about it because I hadn't thought I needed to monitor my own front door. I scrolled through the access log. 11 months of entries. Check-ins at 3 p.m. on Fridays. Checkouts on Sunday mornings. Midweek stays. A booking every 2 weeks, sometimes more. Guest codes Derek had created, each one named by date, and his own code used to let in cleaners, based on the pattern of a short entry followed by a 2-hour gap before a new guest code activated. He had an entire operation. He had thought through the logistics. He had managed this like a business. A business built inside my home, with my furniture, my fireplace, my floors, my address, without a single word to me. I took screenshots of the full log. Then I opened my calculator and spent the next 20 minutes doing math that made my jaw tighten. 47 reviews over 11 months, averaging roughly 1 booking per week at $180 per night for an estimated 2-night stay per booking. Somewhere between $15,000 and $17,000. Conservative estimate. That was the low number. I set the phone down and looked at the watercolor print above my fireplace. Then I took it off the wall and set it on the floor facing the baseboard. I didn't throw it. I just didn't want to look at it. I called my mother on the drive home, not because I expected support, but because I needed to know how far this went. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright the way it always is when she doesn't know she's about to say something that will land like a stone. "Hi, sweetheart. Did you just come from the condo?" I stopped at a red light. You knew. A pause. The small, careful kind. Derek mentioned he was helping you manage the property. He said you two had an arrangement. "We don't have an arrangement." "Well," he said. "Mom, I found out today, from a stranger's review online. There was no arrangement." Another pause, longer this time, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted to the tone she uses when she's decided that the problem is how I'm reacting rather than what happened. "Maya, he's been struggling. You know, things haven't been easy for him since the job situation. He's been taking the money. He mentioned he was handling expenses. Cleaning, utilities. 47 bookings, Mom. 11 months. The access log on my smart lock shows every single entry. Silence. "I'm not calling to argue," I said, even though part of me very much was. "I just want to know if Dad knew too." She didn't answer right away, which was an answer. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment building for a while after that, not crying, not spiraling, just sitting with the full shape of it, my brother, my parents, 11 months, a key I had asked to have returned, a log full of strangers walking through my home. The anger I felt wasn't the kind that spills over. It was the kind that settles in, goes quiet, and starts making a list. I went upstairs and I made tea, and I opened my laptop and I started that list. The next morning I called a real estate attorney named Sandra Okafor, whose card I had kept from a landlord-tenant seminar I had attended 2 years earlier. I had never needed her. I had kept the card anyway, the way you keep certain things you hope will be unnecessary. I told her receptionist it was urgent. Sandra called me back within the hour. "Tell me everything," she said. "Don't editorialize, just the facts." I did. The listing, the 47 reviews, the smart lock log, the estimated revenue, the key I had asked for back, my mother's confirmation that my parents were aware. Sandra listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a short silence before she spoke. "This is straightforward on paper," she said. "Unauthorized subletting of a property you own, income generated without your knowledge or consent, possible fraud depending on how the listing was structured." Do you have documentation? Screenshots of the full access log. Screenshots of the listing with his name. The reviews. My original deed. The key return conversation was by text. I have that thread. Good, the text matters. You asked for the key back and he acknowledged the request? He said, yeah, for sure. I'll bring it next time I see you. That was 14 months ago. Perfect. She paused. I want to be clear with you, once we file, this becomes a legal matter. It will affect your family relationship. I want you to be certain. I thought about the luggage rack where my desk used to be. I thought about the cardboard box with my tax returns. I thought about a stranger leaving a 5-star review about my fireplace while I sat at work not knowing my home was a product someone else was selling. File, I said. Sandra filed a civil claim for unjust enrichment and unauthorized subletting within the week. She also sent a formal demand letter to Derek with a full accounting of the estimated income, demanding repayment plus damages for unauthorized alterations to the property. He had removed a shelf in the bathroom, replaced a light fixture in the kitchen, and repainted the accent wall in the bedroom without permission. He didn't call me. He called our mother, who called me. You're destroying him, she said, and her voice cracked in the middle of the word destroying in a way that told me she had been building up to this call for several days. He made a mistake, Maya. You could have just talked to him first. I found out from a stranger's review. If you had just reached out. He had my key for over a year. He had my address. He had my phone number. If he wanted to talk to me, he knew where to find me. You know how he is. He gets in over his head. Mom. I said it once, not loudly. He didn't make a mistake. A mistake is one booking, maybe two, and then you call your sister and explain and you figure it out together. He ran a business out of my home for 11 months and deposited the money into his account and didn't say a word. That's not a mistake. That's a decision he made 47 times. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, something in her voice had shifted not to agreement, but to something smaller and more tired. Your father wants to know if there's a number, an amount that would settle this. I almost laughed. Sandra will be in touch. 3 days later, Derek showed up at my apartment. I saw his name on the buzzer screen and I let him up because I wanted to see what he would say when he was standing in front of me. He looked tired. He had lost weight, or maybe he had just lost the easy posture he'd always carried, the one that came from moving through life knowing someone would catch him when he fell. He sat down on the couch without being invited and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and said, "You have to understand I was going to pay you back." I sat across from him in the chair by the window. How? Once I got stable. I was keeping track. I'd like to see that accounting. He looked up. You said you were keeping track. I'd like to see it. The dates, the nightly rates, the total, so we can compare it to the access log. The look on his face told me there was no accounting. There had never been any accounting. There was only the story he'd built to explain himself to himself, the version where he was borrowing rather than taking, managing rather than stealing, planning to pay back rather than spending freely. You bugged my lock, he said finally. I installed a smart lock on my own home, which I own. You were spying on me. The log recorded every entry. I wasn't watching it in real time. I found it after I found the listing. I looked at him steadily. You want to talk about surveillance? Let's talk about the guest codes. Let's talk about the cleaning crew you let in with a code that wasn't yours to give. Let's talk about the bathroom shelf you removed without asking. He was quiet. Derek. I kept my voice even. I don't want to fight with you, but I need you to understand that I'm not dropping this. Sandra will walk you through the numbers. If you cooperate and settle, it's cleaner for everyone. If you don't, I paused. The smart lock log is admissible. The listing is archived. The reviews are public record. I have the text where you promised to return the key. He left without saying anything else. The case went to mediation 6 weeks later. Derek came with a personal injury attorney who clearly wanted to be somewhere else. Sandra was calm, organized, and carried a folder that was about an inch thick with documentation. The mediator, a retired judge named Harold Pierce, listened to both sides and asked Derek's attorney twice to clarify Derek's argument, which appeared to be that because I hadn't been using the condo, some informal permission could be implied. Harold Pierce looked over his glasses at that argument and said, "Unused property is still property." Derek settled. $18,400, which Sandra had calculated from the booking history cross-referenced with comparable Airbnb rates in my zip code, minus what he claimed he had spent on cleaning and minor furnishings. He had 30 days to pay. He also had to return the key, formally and in writing, which sounds like a small thing until you understand that the formality of it was the entire point. My parents attended the mediation. My mother sat with her hands folded, very still, the way she sits in church. My father looked at the table for most of it. When Harold Pierce announced the terms, my father made a sound, not a word, just a sound, low and exhaled, and my mother pressed her lips together. Afterward, in the parking lot, my father stopped beside my car. He didn't touch me. He just stood there for a moment and said, "I hope you feel like it was worth it." I looked at him. He was 61 years old, and he had spent most of my life resolving conflict by asking the person who had been wrong to let it go for the sake of keeping things smooth. He meant it genuinely. He believed that harmony was the highest value, and that I had sacrificed it. "Dad," I said quietly, "you let this happen for 11 months. You knew, and you didn't call me." He started to say something. Then he stopped. "I love you," I said, "but I'm not going to pretend I'm the one who broke this family." I got in my car and I drove home. The settlement money came through in 2 installments. I used part of it to repaint the accent wall back to its original color, a warm ivory I had spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing 5 years earlier. I rehung the pieces I had bought. I removed the cream and navy curtains and put my white shears back. I found the comforter that had been folded on the closet shelf and washed it and put it back on the bed. I threw away the welcome basket. I put my files back in the desk drawer. I stood in the middle of my living room on a Saturday morning in November with a cup of coffee and looked at the fireplace. The reclaimed brick, the warm gray of the mortar. I had sourced every piece of that. I had watched the mason set each course. It was mine in a way that went past the deed and the closing documents and the mortgage statement. It was mine the way things become yours when you have worked for them specifically and chosen them carefully and carried them up 3 flights of stairs yourself. My brother was staying with my parents. My mother sent me a text in December, a photo of the family Christmas table, and I noticed my seat was still set. I stared at that photo for a while. I saved it. I didn't respond right away. Derek and I have not spoken since the parking lot. I don't know if we will. I don't know what there is to say that hasn't already been said by a mediator in a conference room in October. Some doors close not with a slam but with the quiet click of a latch, and you stand on your side of it and you breathe, and you realize that the room you're standing in is yours. My therapist asked me once if I felt guilty. I thought about it honestly. I told her no. I told her I felt something closer to grief, not for the relationship I had lost, but for the one that had never quite existed. The version of my brother who would have called me and said, "I'm in trouble, can you help?" The version of my family who would have told me the truth before a stranger's review did it for them. I had spent years being careful with those people, cushioning them, leaving space for the best version of them to show up. At some point, you have to grieve the fact that they chose not to. I changed the smart lock code in January. Not because I was afraid, just because it was time. The condo is mine. It has always been mine. And standing at the window now, watching the snow come down over the city, the fireplace burning behind me and every piece of furniture exactly where I chose to put it, I understand something I could not have explained at 25. A boundary is not a wall you build to keep people out. It's a line you draw to show yourself where you end, and someone else's entitlement begins. I drew it late, but I drew it true. And the ground on my side of it is solid. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needed to hear it. You're allowed to protect what you built. You're allowed to choose yourself quietly, completely, and without apology.